we'll be
Okay.
back on.
Where's this cookie?
There's the cookie plate. All right. So we are now continuing the interview with Thomas Givhan, and we are in his library now. And we have a cookie plate, and we're now going to talk a little bit more about his time at the College of Law. So
far I've taken you all over the place
yeah.
instead of the College of Law. But I did want to say that back when that rabbit thing started close to UK, there was a big sinkhole out there in front of that cannon in the old administration building.
Yeah.
And I used to play in that, and my father played in that as a child. And there was a big dump over there where the UK high school is built. And that means nothing, but that was a pretty good high school. When I was going at Henry Clay, they had a good school over there. And some of the people we knew later were graduates of that school.
So you come back in 1946, in August of 1946, and you start in at the University of Kentucky that fall.
Yes.
And so, that's
College
really
of
a
Commerce.
Continuation of your freshman year.
Yes.
And so, what were your undergraduate studies like?
Well, when I went to, in 1944, I went over there and I wanted to take typing. I didn't take it in high school. And it was a nice old gentleman. He said, you need to take English before you take typing. Well, he could have gotten me killed, because if I could have typed, I could have been a clerk. And I didn't know that, but that was the worst thing he could tell me, not to have that skill. He wanted me to have the English, which doesn't do you much good when you're dealing with BARs and 20 millimeter cannon.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember that as a thing. And I took math and finance, English. ROTC, and something else. I can't remember that. But when I came back from service, my attitude towards education had been changed. I'd spent a lot of time in the Marine Corps on guard duty on that ship. We were on 4 hour on and 8 hours off. And then you go sometimes 4 on and 4 off, and that's pretty hard. That's sleep breaking up like that. But at night, it was extremely dull, and you had time to think. And one of the things that helped me stay sane, really, was I knew every day I spent on that ship, I was going to get 2 days of college. And I would sneak in there and on the midnight watch. The captain was asleep in his headquarters, and on his desk, he had a light that would turn down. And I wrote out a plan for my life on a yellow sheet, yellow pad. It's 4 or 5 pages long, and I had it divided into sections. And somehow, after I got out of school and got home, it just got lost. But the plan basically worked. It only went up till I was 40 years old, in 5 and 10 year increments about what I was going to do. But being a lawyer wasn't in that plan. It was always a business thing or something where I was going to make a living. Some of the fellows that we were with had wanted to be lawyers, and it ended up 3 of my friends we were lawyers, or 2 of them, and me, I made 3 out of the 5 were lawyers. But I told you, I think, that I hadn't decided fully what I was going to do when I left my house going over to register in 1949. I had to make a turn one way or another to go register for law school or go to Commerce College. And when I got down there at that point, I turned to law for the reason that I thought it would make me a businessman, that I'd be able to apply it to business. I had an uncle that was a lawyer in Lexington, and he did a lot of income tax returns for veterinarian. And he knew how much money veterinarians were making doctoring horses, race horses. He decided that I should be a veterinarian. So I was taking his advice in 1947. His sister and my aunt lived out in Iowa, so I went out to Iowa, and I went to pre-veterinary college at Iowa State College, Ames, Iowa. I was a Sigma Chi, so I stayed in the Sigma Chi house. I'd been acclimated to the dress at UK, kind of semi-formal, and you'd go to school with a coat and tie. Went to a football game, women wore fur coats. You bought them great big apples and corsages to go on those coats. People dressed up, high heels and everything, suits and tie to go to the ball game. So when I got out there at Iowa State, that's what I took, was those kind of clothes. Well, I ran into a bunch of farm-oriented people. I was still wearing my Marine Corps Spitshine shoes and my green underwear, jungle camouflage underwear. I hadn't wore it out yet. Well, they were too, except they were also wearing khakis and dungarees. And I decided I wasn't going to change. And so I took a course in botany, English, the dairy industry, and chicken husbandry. And I'm going to school, boy, and it's colder than blue blazes, that damn wind off that prairie. It was cold. And I learned a lot of stuff right there that applied it later on in my law practice. I had a lawsuit about chickens. And I learned something about that, and the stuff I'd learned out there about feed and what the diseases and things, and I had a better handle on it than the lawyer on the other side, and I won that chickens case. But in going to school, I had my sport coat and tie and my Spitshine shoes, and so we go over to these barns, and inside, they had up against the wall on the inside, they had a bunch of cages with chickens in them. And every cage had a question. And they gave you a clipboard, and you had to take this, and they were numbered, so you had to put your number and read the question and make the answer. So about halfway through that, the question became, should this chicken be kept or culled? If you are in the chicken business or the egg business and you let a chicken eat that's not laying, that eats up your profit. And the economics of that kind of fascinated me, and you have to watch that. They also, at that same time, they had these milking parlors where you milked 2 cows at a time instead of what we were doing in Kentucky, lining all the cows up and putting milkers on each one. And they'd put these cows on there and they'd make a single. They'd milk them while they're feeding them. And they were selling fresh milk in New York City. They'd ship it by rail and by refrigerated trucks and bottle it after it got to New York. And homogenize it and all. and pasteurize it. So I found out right quick in the dairy industry, they let me look in a microscope at pasteurized milk and milk not pasteurized. Well, if you look under a microscope at unpasteurized milk, it looks like you're back in prehistoric days and these monsters are on you. You never saw as many things wiggling, as ugly. And I grew up on that Essenbach Dairy in Lexington, selling us raw milk. I lived all my life on raw milk. I couldn't drink any raw milk after I looked at that. Saw what was in it. You look at the pasteurized milk and you might see a little flick of movement. It was that heat killed all that. That undulant fever, you could get from milk. So I'm out there taking this test on that. Well, I learned about a chicken hold. If you want to pick a chicken up, if you're right-handed, you take your left hand and put it under his breast and take one leg and put it between your little finger and the other finger and the other leg between your index finger. Then you've got him. When you hold him like that, he can flop around and do whatever, but you can turn him any way you want, upside down, and you can hold him. So I looked at this chicken, and if he's molten, he's not laying. So one of the tests is, if you're going to cull him, is to see if he's molten, and if he is, he's not laying, and so he's going to get culled. He's going to be eaten or something instead of laying eggs, being fed. I couldn't tell. Well, you look at their comb. Their comb has a different color or a different look or something, and if it's that one way, that's a sign. Well, I looked at his comb, I couldn't tell. So maybe there's another test or two, but then the ultimate test is to measure the distance of the pelvic bones. If the pelvic bones are spread, that means he's laying, and if they're tight, close together, the egg can't get out, so it means he's not laying. Well, that's a hand test. So I take my chicken hold on this sucker, get him out of that cage, and I'm getting ready to take my fingers and put it on his butt, and if it's 3 fingers wide, it's a keeper. If it's 2 fingers wide, it's a suspect. If it's 1 finger wide, it's a cull. So I bring this chicken to my breast, and just coming down to put the 3-finger test on him, and the chicken poops. Poops on my 3 fingers, poops on my tie, and it drips down on my spit-shine shoes. And like a bolt out of the blue, it came a message. Givhan, if you're going to spend all this time studying and put yourself in a position where a damn chicken can crap on you and get by with it, you are a fool. I'm going back to Kentucky. I'm going back to where I belong in Commerce College. So I went back to that fraternity house. I had to get all that shit off me. But I went back to that fraternity house, eating lunch. I stood up. I said, I'm going to tell you all something. I come out here to Iowa to learn something, and I find out that you're eating barley soup. 3 times a week you all eat this barley soup. In Kentucky, we feed barley to the hogs. I'm not eating any more of your hog food out here. Oh, they got to laughing, And I told them what this chicken did to me. They like to die on that. I said, now, I'm going back to Kentucky, and I'm going to go back to Commerce College. It's been nice knowing you. As soon as this quarter's over, I'm gone. And so that's what I did. It's incidental, but I went back to the 50th anniversary of D-Day over in England on a tour that came out of Canada. A guy walks up to me in that hotel and he said, "Are you Tom Givhan?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Did you go to Iowa State College in 1947? I said, "Yes." "Were you in the Sigma Chi fraternity?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I'm old so-and-so, don't you remember me?" And I said, "Well, no, I don't. I'm sorry. I don't." He said, "Well, I'm that pledge that wouldn't line up with everybody." Then I remembered him. That son of a gun would tie a tie where the hang down to his knees, put his pants on backwards, he'd wear his shirts backwards. He'd do anything to aggravate an active. Turns out that he was an architectural, he was an architect, I guess. And he joined the Naval Reserve and became an admiral. And he was in charge of all the Seabees west of the Mississippi River. And he built these Baptist-type churches all over the South with the white steeple and brick. He designed those. He said, "Tom, I had to eat chicken until I couldn't see it. And I had to get up and tell stories and try to get contracts with these people. And I couldn't, you had to have a clean story. You couldn't have one that had any color to it." And I was having a hard time locating myself on doing this. And so finally, excuse me. Finally, I remember that story about that chicken. Said I told those farmers that story, and that's the best joke I had. And I told that all over the South, and I built 290 churches or something. And that story got me off to the right foot to do all that. Said, "I owe you a lot." Now, what do you think the probability would be of me running into that guy in England and him telling me about that chicken story? So, after I got to practicing law, I'd tell that story. Well, somebody at I was in the General Assembly, and some of these people that like me got the cartoonist at the Courier Journal to draw a caricature of me. And that's hanging on my wall down there now. And I'm in a library. And all that's in there is books on chickens. And he's put the titles to them. Chicken thieves. How to defend a chicken thief. How to represent a chicken. Just title after title. Sit there and read that thing. So I got a lot of fun out of that. That's incidental now. I just keep wandering off on
So you come back from Iowa, you go to UK, 1949, you make the decision to go to law school to become a businessman. And so you enroll that fall in the law school.
Yes.
And so you go down, and did you have to do anything to get admission, or did you just had the college credit? At that time, they just needed someone with college credit.
At that time, you had to have 2 years of college with satisfactory grades. Mm-hmm. And you had to pass a test. And then you went to law school, and you could go have a combined degree with a LLB and a BS, or you could go and just get, I think you saved a year or something, you could just go and get the BS, get the LLB. So I was driving to get to life, and I took the shortcut to get an LLB. I passed the test, and they said that I could make it being a lawyer. They didn't say I was going to be a Cardoza, but they said I could make it to be a lawyer. So that's what I did, but then I went and got a job with this mortgage loan company. Then I worked a couple of years for them. And it's a mistake for anybody. It used to be when Dean Evans was the dean out there, he wouldn't let people go to his law school if they worked. A fellow that became president of the Kentucky State Bar Association and held a high office in the American Bar Association from Lexington named Herbert Sled went to see Evans about going to UK law school, and Evans put him in a class of socially inferior people, and he did not get into law school because he worked. He had to graduate from the University of Chicago. He came back here and married well, and was in a big law firm there in Lexington and did well, and he became president of the Kentucky Bar Association and secretary or something of the, maybe, I don't think he became president, secretary or something of the American Bar Association. Stan Givhan became a president of the American Bar Association, the guy from Louisville. It's a friend of mine. I went to China, did all this, and it was on a, first time I went, it was with the Eisenhower Citizen Ambassador Program. So we went over to study comparative law with the Chinese law and American law. Well, I got over, you found out you can't compare it. There's no way to measure it. They don't have any stare decisis, and they just shoot you when they want to. I'm the only guy on that took I got me a copy of the Chinese Constitution, took it. I'm the only one that had that. And after they got over, they didn't want it, till they got over and got to looking around. After they saw what I had, then that was in big demand. And it reads a lot like our Constitution. If you read it, it's got freedom of religion and freedom of petitions and association and all kinds of stuff. But when you go to court, the interpretation is slightly different. At that time, that first trip I went over, I think it had been open about 2 years, and they were still posting these lists at Tiananmen Square with a name on there and for execution, and then when they executed them, they drew a line through it. So when you went up there and looked on where these things were posted, you could see who was being killed, and they would send the empty cartridge case home and make the family pay for the bullet. They put the shame on them, and they had to pay for that bullet. So I had a good experience over there, and we went to prisons and juvenile detention facilities, but they only showed you what they wanted to. Law school, they showed you the best they had, but...
So when you started in law school in 1949, you were just going to get the LLB, right?
Yes.
And so was it a 2-year program or a 3-year program?
3 years.
So you had a 3-year program to get your LLB.
And 2 year previous, I had to have 5 years.
So you had 5 years total.
But I went to summer school, I think, too.
Mm-hmm.
No, did I go to summer school? No, I think I did. I can't remember whether I went to summer school or not.
So starting in 1949, that sort of first year, there's this sort of feeling about one's first year of law school, of it being this sort of a very difficult or trying year. Did you have a sort of similar experience, or were you able to sort of manage it and felt that it was no different than any other sort of time?
Well, it was different because you had some people in there 45 years old. all these veterans, 30 years old, experienced people. I can't think of this gentleman's name. He was from Williamsburg, and he got to be judge of the Court of Appeals. He'd been county attorney, Commonwealth attorney, school superintendent, city attorney. He'd been everything there was to be, locally, circuit judge, and all that kind of stuff, after he got out of law school. But he'd had all these other positions that were not legal positions before that. And his knowledge of what was going on in government was so vast and broad. When he got on the Court of Appeals, they wanted to kind of laugh at him. But he knew more about what was going on in Kentucky than anybody on that court in terms of government, from all that experience that he had.
So
Our classmates, that was a very varied group of people. Bob Hubbard was in the General Assembly while he was in law school. And he came to Hardin County and became Commonwealth attorney, and then he became, just after that constitutional reform, he became a district judge. And he was older. He got shot down in one of these amphibious airplanes in the Pacific. You know, it did everything but kill him. He got injured and everything else. But this was going to school with a guy that had all that stuff. There's all kinds of combat guys in there. Orlandi in that class was a member of the OSS in Italy. He was Italian. I don't know if he spoke it or not. He didn't do much practicing law after he got out, I don't think, but he became mayor of Jeffersontown.
Yeah, so he was an Italian citizen who
Mm-hmm.
came. Was his last name Landy?
Orlandi.
Orlandi.
Are they listed in here?
Well, see, they stopped listing students at the end. They used to have them at the very end of the bulletin, but I don't think that if you look through that, I don't think that they listed the students anymore by that time. If it would be near the end of the.
Well, that's what it's all about. It's funny they quit listing them. The purpose of the whole thing is a student, or it ought to be. Actually, it's not. I know better. Well, it's got names here of something.
Let's see.
Oh, it's the university. States represented in the student body, College of Law, 48 and 49.
So there was so people had very different experiences.
Yeah, and different ages.
Now, but did you all? What was the relationship like between the students?
Well, of course, it's different with different people. And they had kind of little groups that formed together, and my working kept me from being we had study groups that helped studying for exams and stuff, and studying for the bar. And they had fraternities. I didn't join one. I was asked to, but I didn't join one. I already had that fraternity experience, and I should have accepted. And Ned Breathitt approached me, who later became governor, and he asked me to join his fraternity, and I probably should have done it. He later became governor.
Mm-hmm.
Bob Stevens was in that class. Later we had two people in that class on the Supreme Court at the same time. Bob Stevens and from Western Kentucky.
So the relationships, it was hard because you were working and you were also married at the time.
I was married at the time.
Yeah, so you didn't have a lot of time to run around. Now the fraternities every year would throw parties. Wouldn't they, when they have like some big, like in the fall and maybe once in the spring?
Well, I don't know what the UK fraternities in law school did. And I did not stay active in the Sigma Chi fraternity when I got married.
So you didn't. So if the law school fraternities were having parties, you just didn't go to it.
I didn't know. Well, I didn't know it.
Hmm. Now, what was your class schedule like in law school?
Well, you'd take 15 to 17 hours, something like that. Some people took 20.
Was it mostly morning or afternoon?
Mostly morning. I think they had some classes on Saturday, and I had a very mistaken attitude that I wasn't going to go to school on Saturday, and I just didn't schedule myself to go that way. But one of the things I remember most vividly was being in Roy Moreland's class on criminal law, and he wrote this book, The Negligent Homicide, a little pamphlet type book, and had a red cover on it, and they called it The Red Death. And he would pontificate down there in that big classroom, where it was stepped up, and he'd have that book in one hand, and he'd animate it down there, and he'd really get interested in it. And I thought he was a pretty good teacher, but he had biases about stuff. And so we had a guy named Harry Rouse who was my good friend, and he's sitting up there on the back row. And a guy named Chenault, who was a cousin to Judge Chenault over at Richmond, was in that class. And Rouse went to sleep. They were on the back row. Rouse goes to sleep. And Moreland looks up there and sees that, and boy, it really cranks him, and he pumping his hands in the air. Mr. Chenault, wake that man up! Wake that man up! And then Chenault looked over at Rouse, and he looked back at Moreland. Everybody turned around, and he's looking both ways. And finally, he says, "You wake him up. You put him to sleep." God. And they ended up throwing both of them out of law school. They expelled them out of law school. That was part of it. I think it was something else too, maybe, but they expelled both of them. I don't know what happened to Chenault, but Rouse went to law school out in Oklahoma and had a successful making a living law practice out there.
Yeah.
Had a good family and everything. But
what were some of Moreland's biases? Was he? Do you remember?
Well, there was a guy named.
Was it biases against the students, or was it biases about stuff about the law? What was he?
Well, the thing I remember, there was a guy named Clephogus, a Greek, and he had some connections down on Vine Street. That's where that market used to be. And Moreland didn't think that he ought to be a lawyer. And I couldn't tell whether it was something being biased against somebody that was foreign to him, or whether the guy had done something that he indicated that his character was deficient. But Moreland really expressed and I don't know how I know this, but he expressed a dislike for this Kaflogas. And I don't know if he kept him from getting in law school or he kicked him out. But Kaflogas later became an enforcer against bootlegging. Federal agent. Pretty tough guy. I don't know what happened to him. But I was down there, they had the first black student at the University of Kentucky.
It was Johnson, right? Was it Lyman T. Johnson?
Yeah, and he's got a little bust on a pedestal down there between the old Student Union building and the law school.
I think they're going to name a new dorm after him.
Well, he deserves it. Then they had a student come there at UK, black. And that was a black mark on the university, in my book, or the law school. Whoever the idea it was wrong. They would not let that young man go to law school with me his first quarter. They made him go to law school as a student and sit in a room single by himself in Frankfurt. His classroom was the House Chamber or the Law Library for the Court of Appeals down there in the Capitol building. And they sent professors down there to teach him. Here he is as a man. I'm not sure, I don't think he was a veteran, I don't know that. But he singled out for his color and treated differently, that in a way that he had to recognize that they were doing that to him. And he went that first semester, and there was a fellow from Virginia that taught pleading, common law pleading. Like to kill me. Case boring. He got struck by lightning on a golf course.
That's
Killed
right.
him.
I do remember that. I remember someone telling that story.
And he was a nice fella, but he had a southern accent, and he was from Virginia or something, and he was not right with blacks.
Was it Alfred McEwen?
Yes.
What?
Yep.
Alfred McEwen, it says here, professor of law. He went to the University of Virginia, Virginia Bar, practiced in Richmond, was in the Naval Reserve, and then became a professor in 1948.
So he was there when I went.
Yeah, that's his name right down there.
I liked him.
But you say he had maybe not the most open of minds and hearts.
That's my opinion. How can you know? I don't know. You can't tell a heart. I for some reason, I had that impression he was going down there and didn't want to go. And I got the impression that the reason he didn't want to go was because he didn't think blacks ought to be equal. And his attitude and conduct didn't show that.
And so
But I never saw him do anything. But I heard him grumble.
Yeah. Now, he was struck and killed by lightning. That was while you were there at school.
I think it was after I left.
Right after.
I'm not sure.
Jeez.
But how in the hell do I remember that he's from Virginia, and he went down there to teach that guy? I don't know why in the hell I remember that. But I can't think of his name half the time. Yeah. Now.
Yeah. Now, are there any other names on there that really kind of stick out as sort of really important in your education?
Elvis Starr, Oxford man, married a raving beauty queen. He wanted to be president of the university. A highly qualified guy. He's a Sigma Chi. But he had an empathy or an interest in the students. He taught commercial law or notes and something. Most boring. That stuff bored me to the limit. And the monotone that he spoke in and all was terrible. But he was a very personable guy. And he tried, I think I told you that I was active some way with some organization or two, and I'd get him to come and speak to them about life or about something or other. It didn't have something to do with law necessarily. Like the Henry Clay High School Alumni Association or something. He'd come down there one time at the Phoenix Hotel and was our guest speaker. And I can remember his example in this notes class. I think it bored him. He's talking about life and law. And he said, suppose this. Your next door neighbor is your friend. You all go over to each other's houses. So one morning you decide to go over there and visit him, and you go over and knock on the door, and nobody answers. And you notice the door's kind of open. So you call out, and nobody answers. So so you push that door open, and there he's laying on the floor with a knife in him. Looks like he's just dying. You reach down there and pull that knife out, and all at once somebody had called the police, and the police come in that door, and you're standing there with this guy dying or dead, and the knife had killed him in your hand. Now, you're going to be a lawyer. What are you going to do about that? And I never did find out what you do about that.
Oh, goodness. Hold on one moment. I'm
Okay.
going to have to